So we've really been working to find out where the Jazz have been behind the scenes. And we've really been working hard to figure out what the Jazz were attempting to do at the trade deadline. And the fruits of our labor paid off yesterday as we were told that, um, and again, I will say that our sources have been pretty good on the Jazz. Um, we have had the great luxury of having accurate sourcing to go with our Jazz stories, whether that is the Dennis Lindsay story, whether that is Danny Ainge,
Joe Ingles.
Joe Ingles. I mean, just a number of stories, right? So we've been working hard on that. And yesterday we were able to confirm what we had said last week at the trade deadline, that everybody was on the table. And we've been telling you that there's been a lot of friction in the Jazz locker room, mainly centered around the divide that exists between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And in an eerily similar verbiage, Donovan Mitchell went on the Chris Haynes podcast this week and confirmed almost word for word what we've been reporting about his relationship with Rudy Gobert. So it came as little surprise that sources in the NBA told us yesterday that the Jazz had conversations about Rudy Gobert. I don't believe in from what I understand and what I'm told, I don't believe the Jazz were ever close to trading Rudy Gobert. But they absolutely had conversations centered around Rudy Gobert with three Eastern Conference teams about making a deal for Rudy. And I don't think that's surprising in the least bit. Now, can you make a gravitational change like that at the trade deadline? Sure, you can. It's exceptionally rare. There are very few situations where a deal like that gets done. Obviously, James Harden, Ben Simmons, that deal got done. But to trade a supermax contract where Rudy Gobert is making $41 million a year is incredibly, incredibly rare in this league. And what you know now is the foundation's been laid for a deal to get done in the summer. And those are the conversations that I had yesterday with people in the know. And the interesting thing is that the people that we know at the Jazz, as soon as we tweeted that, essentially, they reached out and they were not happy that we were tweeting that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had conversations about it. My sources at the Jazz that are close to that situation did not deny that in fact did happen. I think that it is a pragmatic, smart move for the Utah Jazz to be exploring every option to get this deal done and to make this team competitive. I am in no way, shape, or form saying that the Jazz were close to trading Rudy Gobert. I am in no way, shape, or form telling you that the Jazz had a deal in place. What I am telling you, and I want to make sure we're perfectly clear on this, what I am telling you is the Jazz had conversations with three Eastern Conference teams, and I'm going to do the math on who those teams are here in a minute. But the Jazz had conversations with three Eastern Conference teams about Rudy Gobert and their interest in and what it would take to get a deal done. That's what happened at the NBA trade deadline with Rudy Gobert and the Utah Jazz. And Jake, I'm not at all surprised by that.
No, I think it's the type of thing you want to be doing at the trade deadline. You have to understand, you have to understand it's a super max. You have to understand that it's not easy to trade that contract, and it all starts with laying the foundation and having conversations. And that's the thing I think you got to understand if you're a Jazz fan listening to this show right now. The process by which you go about trading a super max isn't pick up the phone, call whatever team, and then you have the deal done tomorrow. I mean, this is a much lengthier process. I mean, this isn't like, hey, we want to trade Elijah Hughes to Portland for this, that, and the other. That's not that simple. And so, I wasn't surprised when we heard this. I think that it also, on some level, sends a pretty clear message that the organization understands, that everyone is available, and I think by extension through what we're hearing, to me anyway, my opinion is that it sends the message that this team is not going to stay the same. This team they are not just going to stand pat. And I know that, through the trade deadline, they didn't really do too much, and a lot of Jazz fans were disappointed. But I think if you're a Jazz fan, you can feel pretty good about, the intent of this front office. And that ultimately is what matters, because you got to have it takes two to dance, right? You gotta have someone on the other side of the phone who's willing to even have the conversation about Rudy. And I think that ultimately is what they were trying to get done at the deadline. First and foremost, we need to move the Joe Ingles expiring deal. We need to make a deal around that and get that off our books. I think that was mission number one. Mission number two, I think, was to make calls to the Eastern Conference, because you're not going to trade Rudy in the Western Conference. We're going to make calls to the Eastern Conference, to some of these teams, and we're going to figure out who's willing to have a conversation. That way, when the season ends and we're in the offseason in the summer, we can call these teams back and say, okay, let's sit down at the trade table and let's figure out what we can hammer out. And that's what I feel like took place at the trade deadline for the most part.
And I don't think most people understand that that's generally how major deals get done. I mean, you're not making, what's another major deal? Trading Russell Westbrook, right? Trading Russell Westbrook, and we now know that the Lakers could have made a Russell Westbrook trade to Houston for John Wall and, some incarnation of players, Eric Gordon, Christian Wood, like
a package.
Yeah, a package of Houston Rockets.
Yeah.
They didn't want to do that because the Rockets had the leverage and the Rockets were going to make them take on more money. And the Lakers, Rob Pelinka, Jeannie Buss said, we're not going to take on more salary. There's a real good chance that deal gets done in the summer, right? With a guy like Rudy Gobert, who is important to this club as he is also very limited. And it's going to take a longer time than 3 days leading up to the trade deadline. And by some accounts, it was a week. 3 days seems to be what the consensus was in those conversations. But my feeling is that this will lay the foundation for Rudy Gobert to be traded over the summer. And I think that is highly likely. I think that the Jazz have an appetite. As I've told you, I've been told directly by sources in the know around the NBA that the Jazz, and really my sources at the Jazz confirmed it, that the Jazz have told Donovan Mitchell they're going to build this team around him.
Yeah.
And that they understand right now that the roster is dysfunctional. They understand that the roster is not built around Donovan, that it's built, really the focal point of this Jazz roster is Rudy Gobert. And that they have a pretty good understanding that that's not the way that they're going to win a championship.
Here's the game plan.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you're going to see is that this club is as we've again reported, going to do everything possible to get a championship to Salt Lake City. They're going to do everything possible to make sure that Donovan Mitchell wears a Jazz uniform for as long as possible.
Right.
Donovan Mitchell, according to my sources, has told the Jazz point blank, if we're not winning a championship or competing for a championship, I'm not going to be here. I don't have the desire to sit through rebuild after rebuild and losing season after losing season. But I can also tell you that Don's never said, hey, this market's too small for me. I'm a big star. I need the big city lights.
Which is two totally different things.
Yeah, Donovan's never said that. He has never, from what I've been told, Donovan Mitchell has never demanded a trade. Donovan Mitchell has never said, I don't want to be here anymore. What Donovan Mitchell has said in his meeting with Ryan Smith, he said directly, I want to win. I care about championships. And Ryan Smith said to Donovan Mitchell, we are going to do everything to win a championship. We will spare no expense. We will build this roster around you. And our only goal in every move we make is to win a championship.
You ain't first, you're last.
So trading Rudy Gobert makes perfect sense in that light and in that conversation.
Yeah.
Were they close to trading Rudy Gobert at the deadline? No, they were not. And I think that will happen in the summer. And I know I'm being a little repetitive, but I want to make sure we get this right because I think it is a huge moment in time. I think the Utah Jazz have a chance to trade Rudy Gobert over the summer. I don't want to put a percentage on it, but I feel like that there is a reasonable chance that happens because the three clubs that make the most sense at the deadline in these conversations, and some make sense, some don't. I think the least likely was Boston. I don't believe that Boston has any use for a guy like Rudy Gobert. And I don't know what you give up if you're Boston to get Rudy. But we had heard from sources around the league at the deadline that the Jazz were trying to get involved in a 3-team deal with Washington. And it makes sense to me that if it is Boston, that they were trying to do a 3-team deal with Boston, Washington, and the Jazz. Now, the other name that has consistently been linked to the Jazz that the Jazz supposedly had interest in was Julius Randle of the New York Knicks. That makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. If Rudy Gobert is not here and you plug in Julius Randle and you plug in other bodies around Julius Randle and Donovan Mitchell, that's a very formative duo. Donovan Mitchell and Julius Randle on the same roster makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. Now, having said that, I don't know what the framework of that deal looks like.
Yeah.
Julius Randle, I believe, is about to go into a long extension, but he's not 35% of your salary cap like Rudy Gobert is. Understand that.
Yeah.
Let that sink in. Rudy Gobert is 35% of the Utah Jazz salary cap.
Why does that matter for someone who doesn't get it?
Because he's not a force as far as offense goes. He is very as talented and as impactful as Rudy Gobert is on the defensive end. And he is. He is, in my opinion, a generational defensive performer. There is no doubt about that. He has earned the Defensive Player of the Year multiple times, 3 in fact. I think he may even win 3 more in his career. But as dominant as Rudy Gobert can be defensively, 1, you can scheme him out of that role, and 2, he is very limited offensively. So when you're paying somebody 35% of your salary cap, $41 million a year on average, who cannot consistently contribute offensively, and who in half-court sets can be schemed by the other team out of that defensive leverage that he is just so incredibly gifted with, you begin to understand that that's 35% of your salary cap that cannot help you win a championship.
Yeah.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, when you do not have other pieces around a guy like Rudy Gobert that are dominant offensively, and really the Jazz have one, and that is Donovan Mitchell.
Well said.
You begin to understand why this build of the Utah Jazz is dysfunctional.
Good, not great. That's what it is. It's good, not great.
There's no other way to really describe it, and I understand why people are upset about that, and I understand why there's frustration in Jazz country.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that ultimately to win a championship, there will be pain. There will be pain. And I think that that's where you're going to go here. So, again, I think the most likely scenario is that Rudy Gobert, I could see him moving to New York. I don't know what the Knicks would have to do on top of that because you don't have the offense there. But as it was described to me, Rudy Gobert would enjoy the opportunity to play with Evan Fournier.
Mm-hmm.
So that also on top of that makes a hell of a lot of sense for the New York Knicks.
Olympic teammates.
They are Olympic teammates and they are very close friends.
Yeah.
And, at one point, I don't know, what was it, several months ago, we were told that people were in Rudy's ear over the summer saying, hey, this is your team. You got to do this. You got to do that. And what happens? He comes back from the Olympic tournament. He's a much more vocal presence. He is calling guys out. There is, the losing is creating friction in the locker room. And frankly, this situation the other night in LA, I think Rudy Gobert got embarrassed. I mean, I think when you look at him, pointing at Royce O'Neal on the floor, like, hey, what are you doing? And then owning none of it in the postgame. Frankly, I think Rudy embarrassed himself.
Yeah, and I just think that as a defensive force, you're not as, you don't have the word I use is clout. That's the best word to describe what we're talking about. You don't have the respect of your teammates the same way that a dominant offensive player, the guy that's basically getting buckets for you, does. Like, think of it this way. One of the best offensive players in the league right now, DeMar DeRozan.
Yes.
He's going to have a ton of respect. That's his team. Like, DeMar is the guy. Donovan is the guy, Whereas Rudy or, Jared Allen or, whatever defensive big you want to think about, those guys are frankly, and I can't believe I'm saying this about a guy who's getting paid that much, but in essence, they are role players. You are somebody who plays one side of the floor, and then you disappear on the offensive end. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just this tricky situation, but I think on the path to a championship, if this is the worst pain you have to go through, trading Rudy Gobert and making some changes to the roster, I don't feel like that's a heavy price to pay if it pays off in rings, because other teams have had to pay higher prices, and Danny Ainge knows about that, so I don't know. I just think that the what's played out, and we have been ahead of the curve on it. I will say that we've been saying this for probably a year at this point, but you can just see that when Rudy's in the game, they're a little bit more limited offensively. When they go with a small ball lineup, they have a lot more options offensively. They do some creative things. The ball seems to move more. So again, it comes off, and I think a lot of people, we saw this, we got tagged in some, Jazz Facebook group about how we hate Rudy and whatever. We don't hate Rudy Gobert. But the problem is we're independent. We don't have an allegiance to the team or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we're going to say, hey, he is a dominant defensive player, but offensively, the limitations are just too much to win a championship.
Yeah, I think the hard part here is that Donovan Mitchell's not a complete product yet. He's not a complete player. And he has to wear a lot of the dysfunction in this situation. I think the selfish, and I always get slapped for saying hero ball. One of the guys I know at the Jazz really, really hates that term. Really hates that term.
Do you know why?
Because he says that's not at all what's going on. And multiple guys I've talked to at the Jazz have said, hey, Donovan, there's not a selfish bone in Donovan's body. Well, his play says otherwise.
Yeah, listen.
Let's be honest about it.
Listen, whether you want to call it hero ball or you want to call it Don's just doing what Don's got to do, whatever, with all due respect, whatever label you want to put on it, the fact is Donovan takes a lot of ill-advised threes from the hash that he shouldn't take. And again, when we talk about complete basketball players, part of being a complete basketball player is decision making and understanding.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Donovan Mitchell. I understand who I am and how the defense prioritizes stopping me to slow us as a team down. So when you have that power on the floor, you have to make the correct decision 8 or 9 times out of 10 for your team to be successful. So when you're the Utah Jazz and you've got Rudy on the floor and Donovan on the floor and Bogey's standing in the corner, Royce is on the wing and Mike's on the other wing, you got to look at this and you got to say, okay, what should I do here? Well, I know what I'm going to do. Rudy's going to come up and set a pick, and then I'm going to get a matchup that I feel like I like, and then I'm just going to go and play ball. And so those ill-advised, 25, 30-footers or whatever they are, those are just not good shots. Can he make them? Well, yeah, he can make them. Can he get by the guy and get the elbow jumper that's like a 70% look for him? Yeah, he can. And that's why I think when we say, hey, it's hero ball or it's Don and everybody else, we're not really saying, hey, Don just wants to take every shot. What we're saying is this team is not complete enough and doesn't have enough talent, and his play clearly dictates that he doesn't believe in the guys around him, or else he wouldn't be taking those shots.
Well, and what you're seeing now is that he's really made an effort, I think, over the last 3 games specifically. I think he's really made an effort to distribute more and to take advantage of the space that he's creating in the paint to get guys better looks. And that's what's so frustrating about guys like Bojan Bogdanović. It's what's so frustrating about, Royce O'Neal. I just think
in the corner won't shoot the ball.
But his name is Buckets, and he won't shoot the ball.
And so if you're Don, what choice are you left with? Hey, I'm going to bring the ball up. Because I actually, to be honest with you, and this is something you kind of pointed out, I really like when Don's running the point. I got to be honest with you. I like, with this current setup, I like Don on the ball, bringing the ball up, running the point, and getting them into good offensive situations because it puts the choice into Donovan's hands, right? You want just like in the NFL or any other sport, you want the choice of how you're going to do things to be in your best player's hands.
Correct.
And with this roster, I think that's the best formula. Give the ball to Don, let him bring it up, and let him run offense. Let him use the pick, or whatever the set dictates. But again, when we talk about hero ball and the way this team tends to kind of fall apart at the end, that's where I think Don's shortcomings and maturity as a player need to come.
Well, and I think that will happen. I think, I still maintain that while they're not comparable players, the arc that Donovan Mitchell on is very similar to the arc that Michael Jordan went on. You've got now to surround him with talent, and he will become a complete player. I really believe that. I think it is.
What is, with Don being a complete player, what is that when you say, hey, Don is now a complete player? What do you envision that as? What do you see that as?
Well, I think the biggest hole in his game right now is his defense, and we're starting to see that he's a wanting defender. He had some moments in that Laker game specifically where he played really good defense. I thought his defense on Russ in a couple of one-on-ones was very good. And I think Donovan is showing you that he's working on that. I would expect his defense and his footwork. Don tends to cross himself up sometimes defensively. And I think that's something he can grow into. He's got to develop better footwork, right? He will do that. I think defensively is his biggest hole in his game. But I also think, mentally speaking, Donovan Mitchell has to hit a switch. And my guess is, he's that dimmer switch, right? He was never passing. The dimmer switch was all the way down. The room was dark, right? Well, now you're starting to see him push that dimmer switch up a little bit. There's a little light in the room. He's starting to kick the ball out, and you're starting to see more productive sets. During that homestand where they won, 6 in a row, Donovan Mitchell was the motor on that homestand, right? And by no coincidence, Rudy Gobert's out, Donovan's in, and it's Donovan's team. It's Donovan's room. Donovan's the straw stirring that drink, right?
But isn't that the challenge? It's Donovan's room either way. It's just how loud Rudy's going to be. That's what it seems like to me.
And I think, look, if Rudy and Don are here for the next 5 years, they're going to have to figure out how to lead together. Because I think, frankly, I think both of them want to be something that neither of them are, and that's an alpha male. Rudy Gobert, I think for every one of his failings, Rudy Gobert is trying to lead the team. He is trying to be the alpha in the room, and he just doesn't have it. He ain't that dude. And I think that's the biggest issue. I think this team is thirsty for Donovan Mitchell to step up and be a leader. He says the right things. I think that Rudy has blown his leadership feet off by talking about Devin Booker and taking to social media and...
Okay. So that's how it's going to be.
And pointing at Royce O'Neal. Like, you can't lead that way and be successful.
Yeah.
You can't. Great leadership is about building guys up. It's not about, tearing guys down, right? And it's so easy to be a leader when you're winning. It's really difficult, and the test of your leadership mettle comes through losing and adversity. That's when great leaders are defined. Leadership is defined in adversity. In this team, when things go to shit, this team doesn't have a true, strong leader. That's what you need. When you're down 3 with 14 seconds to go, where's the good shot coming from? Because you know what? I watched a Milwaukee team last night not even get close to a good shot to try and win a game. And it's because Giannis Antetokounmpo is a great player who doesn't know how to lead.
Facts.
Right? I look at teams like, if you think about LeBron James, you can say a lot of things about LeBron. You can call him, what do people on the show call him? LeBum or LeBust, or call him whatever you want.
Yeah.
He's got rings, and when the game's on the line, give LeBron the ball.
He's been clutch.
Good things will happen. Ask the Jazz the other night. Ask Rudy Gobert the other night, not stepping out on LeBron defensively. Right? LeBron's going to take advantage of that. That's the attitude, not the talent, mind you. That's the attitude that this team's lacking.
Yeah.
All right, let's get some comments in here. Steve Hambone first in. He says, good morning, guys. What's going on with Gobert? Well, we just told you. Edgar Garcia says, good freaking morning, players. Good freaking Friday morning. Amen to that. Aptus Lopez. Nice to meet you. says, what's up from Manila?
To Manila.
Where's the most likely destination for Gobert? My guess, I feel like New York my guess is New York would be a very good destination. I don't believe they trade him in the West. I don't. I think that would just be a really foolish move.
Yeah.
I think that I could absolutely see him being a fit with the Knicks. The Knicks are going to have to remake that roster again. I mean, especially if Fournier's there in the long term, and whatever that is in this league, 2 years. If he's here the next 2 seasons, I could see Rudy being a fit there. I don't see him as a fit in Boston because you're not built for his style. Although they have a plethora of offensive guys, and if you put Rudy Gobert in the middle of that defense, look out. Because they've got 3 guys. Jason Tatum is capable of being an elite defender. Marcus Smart is an elite defender. You put Rudy Gobert into that mix.
Jaylen Brown's a great defender.
Jaylen Brown is a very quick defender. Jaylen Brown is an instinctual defender. They would be elite defensively. I don't know how that impacts their offense, frankly. That I'd be interested to see. But what's it going to take to get him to Boston? They're not giving up. They're not giving up a whole lot to get Rudy Gobert. And how much money are you going to have to send with him? Washington, I don't know what. Are you trading Bradley Beal? That doesn't feel like something you're doing because he's going to free agency.
Yeah.
Right? So is that a sign and trade deal? Is Bradley Beal signing and trading to Utah? That doesn't seem likely. I could see them. I could more see that being a sign and trade with the Lakers or the Knicks or I could see that. I think the most likely destination is the Knicks. I think that's the best fit. Honestly, the team that needs him the most is probably the Chicago Bulls. A team like that really lacks a big. A team like the Atlanta Hawks that's got all kinds of offense that lacks a big, that needs help defensively.
Yeah.
Those are the teams in the East that make the most sense, but how many of those teams even have the goods to get that kind of deal done?
And want it.
I don't know that many want it. I don't know that many have the goods to get it done. I mean, it's strictly a guess, a conjecture, but, my feeling is that there's a deal to be had with the New York Knicks if you want to have it. It's just a matter of what ultimately makes that deal happen over the summer. Because the Jazz don't have a whole hell of a lot of assets to give to get anything. That's the other thing. I mean, one of the other conversations I had the other day was that the Jazz were operating on the phones to the point of desperation. So take that for what it's worth. Tyler Hopkins says, I could see the Jazz trading Rudy during the offseason, but hopefully the team is smart about which team they trade him to. I would agree. Cody says, you guys bash on Rudy so much, yet you said nothing about Mitch when it comes to clutch time and to win the game. You don't rely, are you trying to say rely on him to make it for the win? Name one game you made a clutch shot. Well, I mean, you go back to Denver in the bubble, and you wish that he hadn't had the ball taken from him.
The fact is,
here's
the thing.
I think he was doubled out of that.
The fact is he just hasn't had enough opportunity in the postseason to make huge clutch shots. And frankly, they're not a team that plays tight games for the most part. You're a team that is playing 2-possession games at the end of the game. To have the opportunity to make a clutch shot, you got to be down by 2 or down by 3 with 5 seconds left and the ball.
Again, I just go to what Doc Rivers did in Philly last night, like using Maxey, bringing Thibault in, like just the flexibility of that Sixer roster is why they won the game. And you have a guy in Joe that's out there balling, hitting threes, getting to the basket, getting to the line, and this is without James Harden. And you look at how Doc Rivers was able to manipulate that game offense to defense. And I mean, you start to understand why Philly's one of the best teams in the NBA.
But I also think Cody Strickland's also saying that we bash on Rudy. Again, you can take it that way, but I don't think it's bashing on Rudy. I mean, again, it's not like we're not saying other things about other players. Again, we're not making up a narrative about Rudy. The guy doesn't have an offensive game. He's one of the best defensive players in the league, if not the best defensive player in the league. That's why he's a 3-time defensive player of the year. So I don't think that I just don't think it should be taken as, hey, you guys bash on Rudy all the time, because we don't. Like, it is the conversation. If the
Yeah.
guy had an offensive game, he'd be Nikola Jokic, he'd be Joel Embiid, he would be Karl Anthony Towns, but he doesn't. So how is that us bashing on the guy? We are literally just like truth telling about Rudy Gobert. We're truth telling about Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell's got everything you need on the floor except for decision making, in my opinion. I think he's got the shot. I think he's got the balls to take the big shot. I think, he's a great passer when he does pass, which he needs to start doing more of. Like, he's working on things in his game, but you can see the development and the path to greatness
Yes.
for Donovan Mitchell. With Rudy, I don't see the development at all. I don't see the little things. I don't see the effort to improve.
Yeah, but I think we've talked. The development piece is what we talk about consistently.
But I want Jazz fans to understand, it's not, we don't just jump on the show and start hating on Rudy. That's not what it is. And just because, and this is the other thing I think that's so important. If you disagree with our takes, that doesn't mean that we're hating on Rudy. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that we're wrong and you're right, or you're right and we're wrong. It just doesn't. The point is that Rudy Gobert is the hurdle that is holding this team back from making other trades that would allow them to become an NBA Finals caliber team.
By no fault of his own.
By no fault of his own.
Because
Yeah.
of the contract and the way the rest of the roster was built.
And I think it's important to say that. Who should we really be blaming? This is Dennis Lindsey's responsibility and fault at this point, Dennis Lindsey is the one who wanted to sign him to this $40 million deal.
Yep. Edgar Garcia says Cody's panties in a knot. Gobert needs to get needs to go. Too much drama with him. I think Cody, you make a good point. I mean, Don has, and I think I said this a few minutes ago or maybe yesterday. Don's got to wear some of the responsibility for this team. And I would agree that. I mean, that's the guy you want to take the biggest shot when the game's on the line, when your season's on the line. Don needs to take that shot. Now, unfortunately, in the Clippers series last year, he was hurt. So I don't know that he was functional to the point where he could take that shot. And, I think one of the things that this Jazz team is so clearly doing is they're trying to limit guys' minutes to make sure that everybody's as healthy as you can be for the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are still convinced that when Don, Mike, and Rudy are a hundo P in the playoffs, or as close to it as they can be, that they're a formidable team. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I certainly don't. I'm not all in on that.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Dane says, did y'all see Rudy blame not being 100% for the Laker game after he said he was fine and spry? I just think that Rudy Gobert has an ownership issue.
Yeah.
Rudy Gobert has a self-accountability issue, and until that goes away, I don't see him growing. Samon Lott says Gobert's a casual.
Well, here, let me find the casual drop here.
You're a casual.
You are a casual.
Yeah, there you go.
I agree with that. Edgar agrees with that. George Mitchell says, if Jazz trade Rudy, who is the best option to make a trade?
No, we went over that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of fit and stylistically. Samon says, Sam, your name is Sam.
Yeah.
Sam says Porzingis for Gobert. MGTV says, who's going to want to trade for Rudy with that crazy contract? And you're not getting the mad player for what he's getting paid. No, you're not. You're not. You're not getting the same player. You're not. The quality you're giving to get. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Brylark says Rudy would be great on the Bulls. I think he'd be a great fit there. Pablo Petrozzi says Haywood plus fills for Gobert. I don't know what that means. Eric DeVera says Atlanta and Chicago. Atlanta would be a great fit for him.
Yeah.
Brylark says, I love how Cody and James Knight are turning into complete heels on this show. I love James Knight. That's my
I
dude.
don't think that they're turning into like heels if they're like I guess bad guys or something. They're not turning into that. I just think it's important for us to say on the show that we don't hate Rudy. We don't. The problem is, and I think, and again, this is probably another show, a different conversation or whatever, but I think the Jazz fan base is so conditioned to only positive take on their team. They're so conditioned to, oh my God, everything's fine and Rudy's the best. And did you see this? Did you see that? And I think it kind of comes as a shock to the system when you have an independent show like ours who doesn't have a stake in the game, truth telling about what this team is right now, which is they are a second round playoff team right now. That's the wall they've gotten to. Do they have the opportunity, or will they have the opportunity this year to get to the conference finals? I sure hope so. I would love to see that, because frankly, when the team's doing better and, they're having success, that's good for us. I would love to sit on this show tomorrow and be like, holy cow, did you see Rudy rolled out a jumper?
That'd be great.
That would be amazing. But I haven't seen that. So what are we left with? That's what nobody wants to talk about. That's what nobody wants to say. So with all due respect to James Knight and Cody Strickland and anybody else in the comments, like, it's not that we're bothered by you disagreeing or saying that we hate on Rudy. But
Not at all.
But I just don't hate Rudy. I'm talking about what the guy gives me to talk about.
Yeah, it's not personal. I think that's
Yeah.
the hard part for people to grab. Cody says, okay, fourth quarter, he wasn't there. Great. He got 28 points in the first half. But when the team needed him to take a shot, he was throwing bricks. If Mitchell steps up as a leader, then Rudy wouldn't need to be.
I do agree with the concept that Donovan Mitchell balls out in the first half, but a lot of times doesn't show up nearly as much in the second half. That is something that I have seen.
Yeah.
I will give you credit for that take. I don't necessarily disagree. I think, as a player, that's also part of the maturity portion. And I also think when it comes to performing late in the game, you got to understand the defense is going to key on Donovan. They're not just going to let Donovan Mitchell go off. Again, and everybody seems to do this on Twitter, but if you look at Devin Booker, notice that his clutch level or his ability to perform in the second half has gone way up over the last 2 or 3 seasons, because the team and the guys around him have gotten better. So the defense can't just key on him. And that's also what I think, hurts Donovan's ability to go off for 20 in the second half.
Yeah, and by the way, I'd point out that Mikal Bridges isn't an all-star, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
King Essential says, opinion on Quinn staying if there's an early playoff exit. I think no matter what, you're probably making that change in the summer. We talked about this at length on the show yesterday, and in short, I would just say I think the voice has gotten dull in the room. He's been there a long time.
I don't think he's doing a bad job, but I just think it's time for change.
I think you're going to bring in a largely different roster, and I think that requires a different voice.
Yeah.
I think.
God
Hi.
bless your soul, sir.
Excuse me. Thank you. I think that he's been here a long time.
Yeah.
I don't dislike Quinn Snyder. I think Quinn's a hell of a coach. I was thrilled when they hired him. I think he's done a very good job. Sometimes you just need change. Cody Strickland says, Quinn has lost the team, in my opinion. The lack of not playing young talent to get them developed hurts his staying. I agree. I think his biggest flaw has been the lack of player development. There's not a guy frankly, there's not a guy on this roster that you can say from his youth to now has grown exponentially. And I think the biggest indictment on that is probably Rudy's offense, or the fact that Donovan Mitchell, spends a lot of money on his body and on his skills over the summer. Mm-hmm. And he usually comes back with a deeper bag of tricks. I mean,
and you would expect that out of a guy like Donovan.
Yeah, and the truth is that anymore in the NBA, you don't have time to practice. The schedule, you play too many games in too short of a window, and you can't practice for an hour every day.
Yeah.
Your development time is in shoot-arounds. But you know what? I mean, yesterday the Brooklyn Nets put out a video of Ben Simmons shooting threes.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I want to see Ben Simmons shooting threes? Is that development? I don't know. We haven't seen Ben Simmons play this year. Maybe he's taken all this time and developed a three. It looks easy for him, frankly. But you don't develop during the season, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. Josh Lovren says Don doesn't show consistent leadership qualities on the court. That's going to hold the Jazz back after Rudy is gone. I actually think he does show leadership on the court. Don's the guy that's going to go up and talk to you, and you see him, hey, go over here, and like you see him. And I think some of that's acting, frankly.
Yeah.
But I think that's what leadership looks like in the NBA. If you talk about, the best leadership guys in the NBA, whether that's Draymond, LeBron, certainly, those are the guys that are routinely looked at as leaders in this league. They act the same way. So, I think Donovan Mitchell's a hell of a player who's got a lot of maturing to do.
Yeah.
All around. So, Coach, I don't think you're wrong. Eric DeVere says fans nowadays can't differentiate hating. I'm Filipina, and JC has lull streaks that hurt the Jazz, and even be traded, that's not hating, that's just real. Jordan Clarkson is a national hero in the Philippines, and if traded, we would follow him.
Yeah. See, and I
Yeah.
don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like I agree. Like that he does. You're not wrong. He does have cold streaks that do hurt the team. They really need his contribution off the bench.
Cody Strickland says, can we talk about something real that Gordon Hayward's wife is smoking hot? Oh, Robin Hayward is amazing. I mean, now that she's had several children, and she's still amazing. If you don't follow Robin Hayward on Instagram, frankly, you're missing out. Anyway, Rafael Reyes says, who are your top 5 head coaches that you see in the Utah Jazz?
I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, I have no idea.
You know, and again, I'm not trying to dodge the question. I just don't think that I can't really answer that question because I don't know what.
Who are the players that are going to be here?
Who are the players?
What style?
What's the philosophy? Like, you know, you got to name head coaches. I mean, you got to understand what your team is going to look like.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
That's
again,
tough.
the best example I can give is like, you know, you look at a Mike D'Antoni from all those years ago. He's not going to go and coach in an organization that's defensive minded. That's not his style. So to answer who you want your head coach to be, you got to know what the roster is going to be.
Nate Cutler says, what's up from Hill Air Force Base? I really enjoy your podcast. Keep up the good work, guys. Thanks, Nate. Good to see you. If you're in service, thank you for your service to our country. ADZH says, do you believe Nurkic and Josh Hart trade for Gobert would work? A lot of people have asked about that exact deal. I love Josh Hart. He's a role player.
Yeah.
I think Nurk is a guy that is again very limited.
Playoff experience though.
A lot of playoff experience. I don't know. If I'm the Utah Jazz, if I'm trading Rudy Gobert, I am only doing it to find a completely different skill set on my wing. I want my 2, 3, 4 to be incredibly athletic. I need, again, I'll go back to Philly last night. I need a Thibault.
Yeah.
I need somebody that, can defend 3 positions. I need somebody that can shoot the 3 and get to the basket. I need a better version of Kyle Kuzma. I need that guy.
The difference
Length,
maker.
size, shooting, speed. I need that guy.
Yeah.
I don't know who that guy is. I don't know that guy's available. Would have been nice to add a Tyrese Halliburton to this team.
Yeah.
Would have been, if you look around, look at the guys that got traded. I mean, again, the lower end guys, the Karis LeVerts, the Spencer Dinwiddie's would love to have that kind of skill set on your team. But when you trade a guy like Rudy Gobert, who is, arguably the best defensive player in the NBA, I'm going to need a little more than Nurk and Josh Hart. I need more than role players. Now, having said that, there is value in just getting that contract off your books, right? That you're going to lose on that trade. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yep.
You're going to try and limit that loss as much as you can. But I don't know that a Nurkic Hart deal gets that done.
And I don't know that I
frankly.
like that. Yeah, I just don't think that's enough. I think I agree with you. I think you need more.
Jeremy Bolton says you need that guy, guys.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Hey, guys. Exactly right. All right.